Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I am your host, Dean Phillips, and with me today, I have Jay Miller from Born Guitars. He is, of course, the owner and luthier. Welcome, Jay.
Hi, Dean. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to have you here today on this beautiful day. So
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And tell me right off the bat, what do you see changing over the next 5 years in the manufacturing and building of guitars?
That's a great question. It's anyone's guess, but I think what's going to happen with manufacturing as machinery and software becomes more accessible and there's lower barriers to entry, I just think we're going to have more companies and more individuals entering the market, and it's been continuing that way at least for the last 10 years. Just in the United States, last time I checked, there was over 400 or 500 guitar builders just in the U.S., and that doesn't include Europe and overseas. So there's healthy competition and lots of innovation and people going in all directions. But in my industry, there's very low barriers to entry, and that's just going to increase because CNC machines, just as one example, are just decreasing in cost every year. And the accessibility to different software options is increasing. And also the software in machinery is easier to use all the time.
Right. Yeah. There's no question about that. Everything, you think about how computers used to be, you needed to know what you were doing before you even started. Now you can turn one on and just start pushing buttons and you can get to the screens you want to get to. It's amazing how we kind of try to make things more user-friendly. Unique concept, huh? So
yeah. And I think that'll pass through all industries to where more and more you'll have almost at-home manufacturing at some point.
Right. So let me ask you.
You say, hey, my dog ate my spatula. Make me a new one, and AI will hear you and print one out.
Yep. We're probably not that far off on that.
Yeah.
Tell me. So you're the owner and luthier. So explain to our audience what a luthier does.
Luthier essentially builds stringed instruments. So it could be a violin, a cello, or a guitar.
Oh, excellent. Now, what got you involved in building instruments?
It's really a passion. I grew up with a wood shop in my house. I was lucky enough that my dad was into woodworking and I could mess around with his tools. Luckily, I still have all 10 fingers. But yeah, I've been exposed to that, and I've always been into music. I've been playing guitar since I was in high school, and just tried to basically, and my initial thought was to mash everything I'm into and passionate about all together into one, including entrepreneurship and wanting to start my own business. So
sure,
that's how I initially got into it.
Good. So when you got involved in doing that and building guitars, what kind of drove you to that first design? Was it, I think I can build my perfect guitar, or the guitar that's perfect for me? Or was it more like, hey, do you think somebody else coming up to you and can you build me a guitar like this?
The initial thought was to build a better guitar. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I did is a ton of research. Obviously I knew a fair amount about guitars, but researched and really evaluated the design of existing instruments, what people liked about them, what they didn't, what I liked about them, what I didn't, and took notes on those and incorporated some classic design elements and incorporated some new ideas and designs. And it went through many, many iterations and prototypes to get to where I have the models I have now.
Now, when you start talking about designing and building it, obviously you didn't start with probably the equipment you have today. What led you to the more innovative ways of building guitars and taking that on compared to when you first started? Was it more ease of use, or was it speed of how quickly you could make things?
Touching on the latter, but it was about customization, and I think this is where manufacturing's gone in general. But I'm more connected to the guitar industry, and what I want to do, or have been doing, is focusing on what each specific customer wants and tailoring each instrument to that individual. And that's expensive. One-offs is very expensive. It usually takes some research and design. Whereas if you make two versus one, the second one is exponentially faster to make. So to do that, I just immediately started researching into how can I do the customization at a lower cost, and so that it won't be reinventing the wheel every time and chew up labor costs.
Right. And that's a big aspect when you're talking about customizing building like that. If now I owned a music store back almost now going on 30 some years ago. And at that time, a lot of the companies that were building guitars or custom making guitars, a lot more of it was done on just super basic mills and machining centers, or if it even went to that, most of them were building it on just a simple lathe and had a bandsaw. If they had that. Some didn't even have a bandsaw, so they were trying to cut the wood just whatever way they had with a table saw or anything else. How much math goes into this for some of the people that we have on? Sometimes we have students that listen in, and we have people that tune in from engineering. From a STEM curriculum, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, how much of that went into design? Because it is a mathematical concept, going from the nut to the bridge and determining the midway point is your 12th fret. There's a lot of math that goes into that. Was that more of a necessity to get to that point to determine scale lengths and all of that? Or was it something more of just a kind of trial and error? I find that math is critically important to have efficiency in it. You can do trial and error, but you're taking shots in the dark and trying to hone in on a blind target. And so the trial and error method can work with some things, but and is useful in real life applications. For example, the trial and error can be used. You mathematically on paper, the proper feeds and speeds for a quarter-inch end mill router bit, but in real life, when it's cutting through figured mahogany, maybe you notice that there's a little different feeds and speeds that actually work with that specific material or the grain of the wood. But that said, to get to your point, I think the mathematics are critically important. With a guitar, you have to know a lot about geometry, and understanding that math helps you understand how the guitar works and how to set it up the proper way. And it allows in prototyping, I can design the guitar before ever even making one, and have it come out nearly perfect, because if you understand the geometry, you can design the product to fit the problem. Right.
And the math the nice thing is it's critically important to understand why you use the math, not just how to plug numbers into a formula, but how the formula works and why you use certain math. And then once you know that those fundamentals, you don't necessarily these days need to hammer out the calculations yourself. We're lucky these days that software does a lot of that for you.
Right. Do you find that people come to you knowing what they want, or do you have to kind of figure out from asking them certain questions what they want out of their guitar, and then determine then, okay, I'm going to need to have this scale length, or I'm going to need to put in these pickups. And if you put in those pickups, there's certain properties that you have and certain things that happen with the string vibrations and the resonance of the wood. Do you find that you get that from them right away, that here's exactly what I want? Or is it more, okay, I've got to be a detective here and try and interpret what they're saying and what they think they want into what I can make them?
There's a little bit of both. And as many options as I offer, I limit some of the options because when there's too many options, some people get into paralysis by analysis. There's just too many options and too many decisions to make. That said, I have a lot of customers that they know what they want, but I have to interpret that as you suggested and decide how to bring their dream to fruition. So a lot of times I get more of an idea, like I want the ultimate rock guitar, and I want it to be, you know, very percussive or have a certain tone or a look, and then I help curate that by saying, okay, well, these woods are going to bring out a little more bass and give you this look and feel and all these elements put together kind of add up to this ultimate dream that you want. So there's a lot of knowledge that goes into, you know, what electronics, which electronics will do what, and kind of guide you towards a general target. And then if you point everything in the same direction, you usually hit the mark.
Gotcha.
But it takes a lot of expertise, and I think you only get better with time. I think one of the most important things is lifelong learning experience. So,
right,
as good as I am now, I'll look back 10 years from now and go, "Wow, I didn't know anything back then." But yeah, no. It's did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, I
okay.
I get that. And do you find that more people want to have choices over woods or physical design elements, or do you think that they're more interested in things like pickups? What things kind of drive how you're going to design things, and then where does that take you when you're to allow you to do your creativity?
Well, the coolest thing with the guitars I'm building is every one of them is almost always a one-off. It's completely customized to what that individual wants. And the hardest part about that is sometimes it doesn't align with what I like. And so I have to put myself in someone else's shoes and say, you know, this is what they've told me. This is kind of what they're going for. This is the vibe. And do it the way they want, not the way I want. And that takes a lot of thought and consideration. And it's just the best feeling when you hit the nail on the head and they go, "Oh my God, this is exactly what I'm looking for." But it depends on the customer. Some people are way into, I want these specific pickups and blah, blah, blah. I don't care so much about the look. You're the expert. You take care of that, or vice versa. I really want it to look like this, but you're the aficionado. You pick the neck shape and the electronics that you think are going to make it sound the best. So I get the full gamut. Guitar players in general are very particular, and everyone has their own opinion on what they want. It doesn't seem like a one size fits all product when it comes to experienced guitar players and players who know exactly what they want. You could think of it like with sports. If you're an amateur, and you want to go mountain biking, probably most mountain bikers are going to do the job. But if you're an aficionado, you're going to want certain geometry and fit and weight and spring load and everything. So
right.
It gets more. I'm mostly tailoring to the experienced guitar player or professional.
Right, and I think those are the people that are going to come to you for a custom guitar. Not a lot of beginners probably. First of all, they wouldn't even know what to ask for if they came to you.
Yeah, that's probably right.
When you look at how things have changed, what advice would you give somebody who's getting into building guitars? What things did you learn that changed the way you've thought about building them?
So your question is more about the approach to building, or considering whether or not this is a good industry to get into?
No, more about the first.
Okay. I would just really focus on getting feedback initially. Go with your gut, get some information about what you want to do, and bounce your ideas off of other people. The best information you're going to get is by testing it out and trying it out with other people and seeing what other perspectives are. For example, a couple of the first prototypes I made, it was this what we think is going to be the best, what we think feels really great and sounds great. And the best feedback was just to put it in people's hands and see what they thought about it. And then make adjustments. And also compare to your competitors. Don't be afraid of checking out what they have and taking notes of what they figured out and succeeded at and what you do and don't like about it.
Right. Do you get a lot of people bringing in and saying, hey, this is my favorite guitars. These are these three. I want you to Frankenstein and make me something like that.
I've had some of that. I have a lot of people that say, hey, I have this crazy guitar body shape that I want you to make. I don't personally do that, and I usually refer them to someone else who's willing to do so. I have a specific aesthetic that I want to maintain, kind of a brand identity, if you will. Mm-hmm. But that said, I definitely have customers that say, I have this 1959 Les Paul. I just love the neck on it. Can you replicate that on this new guitar? So there is a lot of this. Let's get the best of all worlds. Like there's this element of this guitar that I really love, but I really love the tone of this other guitar, and maybe let's mash that together and then add this new technology, like a MIDI system, for example.
Right. Do you get a lot of people that come to you with ideas for pickups, or do they ask you for custom wound pickups to get a certain sound that are maybe hotter or more retro, where they weren't running as hot with as many windings on them? Or
there's some of that. There's the full spectrum. Very particular to I have surprisingly a fair amount of customers that believe in my expertise. They've bought into my passion and understanding and go, hey, you're the artist, do whatever you want. Basically, like here, I'll commission you to build a guitar. I have a few general parameters, but from there you just kind of run with it.
Right.
But I also have very particular customers who want samples of a finish and make sure they can approve each step of the customization. Okay, I want my redwood top to showcase the natural color of the redwood, but also let's burst it to a dark brown at the edges, and I have to come up with the dye solution to fit the bill, and then send them images of that, or if they're local, they can come check it out and say, okay, yes, that's it, or no, I'd like a little more of this reddish hue or whatever, as an example. So there's the full gamut, and I think you're going to run into that with customization, because people are seeking you out for that customization. There's plenty of other options on the market that are cheaper and look good and play fine. So, they're searching for something that's either not out there, or they don't feel like what's out there is quite good enough, or they imagine that there could be something better. Or sometimes it's just, I have a dream and I want you to create this thing in my head.
Do you get much of the cocktail napkin designs, just drawing, and to somebody saying, "Oh, can you build me this?"
I get a lot of off the cuff inquiries, like 1 a.m. emails of, "Hey, can you build this with this and that?" and da 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 da. And those tend to be kinds of whimsical ideas that people haven't really thought through that often,
right?
Or that much. I mean,
do you find that with the way things are now, have you had much difficulty still obtaining woods and other products now? I know a lot of manufacturers struggle with getting supplies at this time, and have you seen that for your business?
I know material costs have gone up quite a bit. They're in the wood industry. Most woods are still readily available. Some have restrictions, the CITES restrictions, where it's illegal to import or limited use, or you have to go through the right channels. I'm very proactive when it comes to the wood material sourcing, because of my focus on sustainability. I care very much about where my materials come from and how they're sourced. So it matters very much to me if a small lumber guy is going into the woods, finding a dead maple, chopping it down and dragging it out with a 4-wheeler versus a big company, in Honduras, clear cutting rainforest and harvesting mahogany.
Right.
And so I've made a personal decision that I just won't do that, even though it's available. It's great. Like, just as an example, mahogany is excellent to work with. It's easy to work with. It's beautiful, but there's some big question marks on things like that, and ebony, rosewood, just to name a few. How sustainable it is to even use those, because these trees don't grow like evergreens in mass growth. They're, one here and one, 100, 200 feet away or 100 yards away, and everything in between is a coexisting ecosystem. So, unless they're being very thoughtful and plucking, walking in and just plucking one tree here and leaving everything else as is, you're causing quite a bit of destruction there.
Right.
But on the material side in general, yeah, I think, materials are becoming more expensive. There's a lot more people in the world, and ultimately there's limited supply. I think long term, we're going to have to get better at using non-virgin materials and reusing things, or looking back at maybe more durable goods and things you can repair and fix versus things that'll last a couple of years and then you toss them in the garbage.
Now, have you looked at, speaking of materials, have you looked at some of the designs that I know a few people have made, like carbon fiber bodies and other materials that are not traditional, certainly not classically thought of instruments that people are using now? Have you looked at any of that, and yes, no, different ideas on it?
Sure. Great question. I personally am not into it. I just love the element of woodworking and the classic feel and shaping of that. In the sound, there's something about wood in your hand. But those work. There's also elements of it that I don't like for example, aluminum requires a ton of energy to create it into even just a raw material. Or carbon fiber gets into using epoxies. I just can't stand using very many chemicals. It's just not my thing. I'm always thinking everything I do, how's this affect the air around me, the quality of air in the shop? Is it safe for me? Is it safe for employees? Is it good for the environment? What kind of waste am I going to be left over with? Do I have to wear a respirator if I make this? All those are signs to me that I'm using something that's less safe for the environment or people around me. And we're so disconnected from that. Like, most people live in suburban areas or urban areas where stuff just goes down the drain and you never see it again.
Right.
But that affects you. I live in an area where in the summer there's toads hopping around, and reptilians are very sensitive to chemicals and things like that, and or even the wastewater runs in the streams and it can affect fish and aquatic life. So I'm very sensitive to that, and it makes it harder. It costs more for me to manufacture using more sustainable materials. But I've just made that decision that I want to lead by example and do it the harder way. But I think it's the better way in it. And by forcing that and creating demand, the more products will become available. The more manufacturers and customers demand sustainable products, the more those things will become available. For just as an example, like finishes and lacquers, whether it's for cars or guitars, more and more, whether it's government regulation or demand from manufacturers and customers, they're becoming more conscientious of these things, and therefore the manufacturers of paint and lacquers are developing new technologies and that can deliver the same results with less impact.
Right. Well, Jay, thank you so much. We're right out of time here. Tell people how they can get in touch with you and how they can find out more about your guitars.
Well, you can reach out to us anytime. Our website is bornguitars.com. You can call us anytime at 720-440-2767.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today, sir.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye.